This is the Open Floor NBA podcast where we talk about the league and all the big stories going on in it. Joining me this week from a hotel right down the street in San Francisco, here at the start of the All-Star Weekend extravaganza from the Washington Post, the great Ben Golliver. Ben, are you excited about this All-Star Weekend that we're about to experience?
Look, I'm excited. I can't help myself. I love the dunk contest so much. That's really what gets me going. And we're back in the Bay Area where there was that classic dunk contest 25 years ago. Will we get another classic? Probably not. I was walking around by Chase Center today. One of the big murals they had was of Giannis, who won't be here because of injury. The other big mural was Steph Curry, who's not doing the three-point contest or the shootout with the WNBA stars. No Caitlin Clark, of course. So it feels like a little bit of an empty All-Star weekend, especially when the guys who we've been talking about for the last week, Luca, Anthony Davis, and Jimmy Butler, won't be in the All-Star game either. So a little bit of a strange dynamic here, but nevertheless, we persist, and I'm excited for a good weekend.
Yeah, I don't want to be that guy that belly aches about All-Star, but I'm going to be that guy because this has the potential to be a disastrous All-Star weekend.
Okay.
The dunk contest has maybe its most nondescript field ever, and that's saying something given the last few years have been relatively nondescript. Mac McClung, who has not logged an NBA minute, or has not had an NBA dunk this year, is going for a three-peat in the dunk contest. You've got two rookies and a second-year guy going in the dunk contest, so not exactly the field that you
Not
were
Vince Carter.
Not Vince Carter. I'm writing a column about this. I'm sort of giving away, part of it, but what the glamour of the dunk contest from yesteryear when Jordan and Dominique and Kobe and Vince and, all these great players. You can even go to 2016 when Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon had that great dunk contest. So those days are just gone, man. Like this could be the death knell of the dunk contest. Then you have an All-Star game that no one seems to really understand. You've got multiple teams in there. Shaq's got a team. Chuck's got a team. Nobody really understands how this All-Star game is going to work. So the NBA is now trying for the umpteenth time to fix the All-Star game when the All-Star game has a terminal disease. That's kind of what it is. Like, you can let it play out for as long as you want, but it's not curable. Not with this format, which, by the way, is the same format they were doing on Fridays, for many years in different stuff. Or if they go, East versus West again, America versus the world, it's none of it's going to work. So, yeah, I'm not expecting a big All-Star weekend here, Ben.
Well, and the good news is the weather's great. It's already raining cats and dogs. So, on the brighter side, you've got that going for you, Chris. I understand the pessimism. I totally get it. One thing I'm looking for this year, is there any way Wemby saves the All-Star game? This guy plays hard, really hard all the time. Now, we've seen so many of these other guys from Joker to Anthony Edwards just not take it seriously. What if Wemby goes out there sort of like Tatum a couple years ago and actually puts in a good effort? Would that get people excited? Would that build any buzz on Sunday? Could it help save the tournament format? Probably not. But that's what I'm hoping for because Wemby's in every event. I don't know if you saw that. I mean, he's in the Rising Stars. He's doing the skills challenge with Chris Paul. Something tells me he's going to be throwing lobs to Steph Castle in the dunk contest. It just seems like a no-brainer to get him out there. Can he save the Sunday marquee event? Can he set a new tone that really, kind of pushes back on what the last 10 years have become, where the stars just don't care? That's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm crossing my fingers for. As we know in the NBA, he's probably got 10 brand activations over the next 3 days, and I'll be falling asleep at halftime on Sunday. That's usually how it goes.
Yeah, and I don't mean to lump all international players into one pile, but if you look at the list, if you made a list of the guys that don't give a damn about the All-Star game, there's a lot of international guys at the top of that list. Like Nikola Jokic hasn't tried an All-Star game in years. Luka Doncic is not here, but he has never tried at an All-Star game. Like, unless they've got a shot at winning MVP, you're not seeing effort from a lot of these guys. So I think Wemby's going to be excited to be there. He'll have some great moments, but I don't expect him to reignite the flame of 20 years ago when guys were competing for four quarters and trying to win. We'll see, man. We'll see. Maybe we reconvene.
Let me dream, Chris. Let me dream.
I'll do the best I can. All right. So a few things I want to talk about. And for the first time in several weeks, this is going to be a Lakers free podcast. So if you're listening and you're already eye rolling about potential Lakers talk, have no fear. There will be no Lakers talk here. I do want to talk about another team up here in the Bay Area. That is the Golden State Warriors, who right now are 2-1 in this Jimmy Butler era. Wins over Chicago and Milwaukee. Got beat by Dallas on Wednesday. We're recording this before the game in Houston on Thursday, a game that Steve Kerr was not at all happy that the Warriors were playing, and with the NBA decision makers on that one. Small sample size, Ben, but Golden State in the last 3 games is 7th in offensive rating and 9th in defensive rating. So pretty good. They are 19th in 3-point percentage, so any fears you might have had about their 3-point production have been realized in the short term. But 2-1, Jimmy Butler having off to a good start. Your thoughts on the new look Warriors?
Well, I like the trade terms in terms of what they gave up to get Jimmy Butler. What I didn't like was the contract they gave Jimmy Butler. It just felt a little bit too rich for my blood, $60+ million for the next couple of years for a player at that stage of his career. It feels like a big risk. It feels like a big gamble. If you're going to put together kind of a big three with Steph, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond Green, you would prefer to have those big three salaries be for guys who aren't, aging so deep into their careers as these guys are. So while there's no question Jimmy Butler makes them better, I mean it's an improvement short term on the court, and we've seen that in these first couple of games. I don't think it drastically changes the direction of their season. I don't think it totally, lifts their ceiling. And then really what I get concerned about is what do these next couple of years look like? I mean, if this is a one and done team in the playoffs, for example, they come back next year, injuries could strike. I mean, that's not a guaranteed playoff team to me next season. And then beyond, it could get even worse. So I'm not super doom and gloom like they're wasting Steph Curry's last chapter, but I don't think this is some like major revitalization. I mean, I think it's fun to see Steph have a compliment player, a guy who gets to the free throw line so easily, a guy who can kind of bulldoze his way through the paint. He plays just a very different style than Steph does, and that's really been effective for Golden State. But to me, it's not to the point where longer term, bigger picture. This is something that I think people need to be like quaking in their boots about. Like if you're elsewhere in the Western Conference, you're saying, "Hey, sure, nice move," but this is not the East where Jimmy Butler would live in the Eastern Conference Finals and make a couple finals trips. This is the West where even when he was younger playing for the Timberwolves, he didn't get out of the first round. And that's kind of what I expect for these Warriors.
Yeah, when the deal went down, my first thought was this makes Golden State a little bit better. And after watching 3 games, I still believe they are a little bit better. Jimmy's production point wise is up. He's getting to the free throw line like 11, 12 times per game. Like that's a dimension that Golden State didn't have with Jimmy Butler. And when they were able to post him up and make him kind of an offensive hub, that makes them a more diverse offensive team. And Jimmy can still defend. He's not what he used to be, where you can stick him on a primary scorer and expect him to lock the guy down for 35 minutes per game. But in spurts, he can still be a pretty high level defensive guy. It did worry me. Some of the things I saw in that Dallas game did concern me. When Butler and Draymond Green were on the floor, you could see the Maverick strategy was to shrink the floor with the guys that were defending them. You saw
Yep.
whoever was on Butler, whoever was on Draymond, they were playing way off. Like he was a 7-footer from 25 years ago. They were just backed off in the paint, playing different, playing kind of a roaming defender out there. You can get away with that with one of those guys on the floor. It's tough to get away with it with 2 guys out there. And you combine that with the fact that Buddy Hield has like the 3-point yips, or at least he has the last 2 games. And we've seen his numbers since November when he was shooting the ball great from 3. December, January, those numbers have dipped. His last 2 games, he is 3 of 14 from 3-point range. That can't happen. You can't have 3 guys out there. I guess 4 if you want to include Quentin Post and Kevin Looney and Kevon Looney and whoever's playing that center spot. You can't have 3 or 4 guys alongside Steph Curry that can't shoot a 3. You can't do it. You're not going to beat a lot of teams. That Dallas loss, I mean, that one hurt. I know the Mavericks were energized. They needed a win. Kyrie went bananas again. But, that's a game that if you're Golden State, you've got to find a way to win if you're hunting playoff positioning. So I think, I do think they're better. I think Jimmy improves them overall. He makes them more multidimensional offensively, but he's not a 3-point threat. And in today's game, if you have one or two guys out there consistently that aren't 3-point threats, and right now two of the top three players in the Warriors rotation are non 3-point threats, smart teams are going to figure out how to defend you. And I think we saw the first of that with Dallas, where Dallas had some tape on the Warriors, saw a little bit of how they were going to play, and said, you know what? We're going to back way off on Jimmy. We're going to back way off on Draymond, and let's see if they can beat us in a different way. And they couldn't do it. So
Yeah.
I think you can be happy with the trade for the Warriors, but I'm with you. I don't think it moves the needle in the Western Conference.
No, I think that the two concerns they would have, shooting, spacing, as you're describing, but also depth. And that was something they gave up with the Butler trade, right? Because they're sending out multiple pieces to make the salaries match. They have a number of guys in this rotation now with very limited NBA experience and basically very, very limited playoff experience. That includes Buddy Hield, who's a veteran, but he's not a guy who has much of a playoff track record. Certainly not a guy who has been trusted by his coaches in those big moments to hit shots like they're going to need him to hit shots. So to me, they became a very top heavy group. The top is good, but it's not great, and that's why I think they're going to be, they're going to be fighting in this play-in mix for sure. But then, to hope that they're going to upset one of these top teams in the Western Conference bracket, I just really don't see it. Like if they're a 7 or an 8, imagine them against an Oklahoma City or a Denver. To me, those teams are more complete, and they have better top end talent, and they have better shooting, right? And they've got more chemistry because they've been together all season long. I think those are going to be a quick series, and they're going to go against the Golden State Warriors.
And you can tell the Buddy Hield issues seem to be bothering Golden State a little bit. There was that sequence in the third quarter where Draymond seemed to get pissed at Buddy about kind of a bit of a lackadaisical cut that he made to the basket, and the ball was knocked away when Draymond tried to make a pass there. Like Buddy Hield's got to be efficient offensively. He doesn't bring anything defensively. So you've got to be an efficient 3-point shooter, good around the rim, taking pressure off of Steph from distance. Otherwise, what are you doing out there? He doesn't really add much value other than that. So yeah, it's it'll be interesting to see the second half of the season with Golden State, and and I think Jimmy's going to get a little bit better as he gets in better shape. He's going to have some great nights, but I think more and more teams are going to really shrink that floor against the Warriors and dare them to beat them, dare those guys to beat them from the perimeter. All right, let's go over the Eastern Conference and talk about the Knicks, who have won 8 of the last 10 games, sitting pretty firmly in third place in the Eastern Conference. Karl-Anthony Towns has been everything this team has asked for offensively and more. An all-star, top 10 in the MVP, in my opinion. Jalen Brunson continues to shine. They are, Ben, though, still way too offense heavy. They're number 1 in the NBA in offense scoring wise, bottom half of the league in defensive efficiency, which is a little nuts given how many good wing defenders that they have. Cleveland, they're at the top of the conference right now. The Bucks are right there. How do you view the Knicks? Do you look at them as being a real contender, a real threat to Boston, who right now they'd face in the second round? Or are there still too many holes defensively to count on them?
No, just give them the bronze medal for the conference, right? Like they're right where they should be. They're the clear-cut third best team in the conference. I think there's a gap between them and the Milwaukee's of the world in terms of who do I trust in the postseason, given some of Giannis's recent injury issues, given the trade deadline move, sending Middleton out and so forth. Like they just seem like a very, very solid number 3 in that Eastern Conference. But I think there's a real gap there between the 1 and 2 and New York. I think Boston would look at that matchup with all the confidence in the world. They're going to feel like they're much deeper and better balanced than the New York Knicks are. They're going to feel like they could pick on Karl-Anthony Towns defensively and get what they want.
They did. Like you go back to that game on Saturday, they put up 131 points, and how many pick and rolls did they put Karl Towns in? Like that was an example of how good teams, good playoff teams, going to try to exploit them.
Yeah, and even if you're not drawing him into every action, he's just not going to be challenging and contesting shots around the basket area at a great rate, right? He's going to be getting himself into foul trouble because of the player control stuff offensively, because he has the ball so often. It just feels like they're very thin there still in the middle, and they didn't really address that at the deadline like some people maybe thought they would, right? So I think the Knicks, to me, have been very impressive in their stability. Like they haven't had tons of injury issues, which I'm sure has, helped them build that continuity and keep their offense really humming. The pieces fit so well offensively. It's been right what I expected in terms of a best case scenario on that end. But you're not going to come out of the Eastern Conference if you're a one-way team, right? Unless you're playing elite on both sides of the ball, you're not going to get through Boston. You're not going to get through Cleveland. Now, you could scare them, right? You might beat one of those teams in an upset type of scenario, but you're not going to win the conference. And so that's why I say they're bronze medals, man. And it could be one of these things where they come back next year and they have an off season to make some tweaks, make some additions, fill in some of the holes, find some bench players that Tom Thibodeau actually trusts, and then they can come back and really be contenders. But I think this year, they're having a great time, but it's not super substantive. It's kind of like popcorn stuff to me.
Yeah, they miss Mitchell Robinson. I think that's a big reason they're sitting like 19th in defensive efficiency right now. Not having him as at least an option to swap out for Karl Towns in certain situations to be that defensive anchor. I mean, he hasn't played a game all season long, and you keep hearing and reading about how he's going to be back at some point. But even when he does come back, like what kind of condition is he going to be in, having not played a game all season while sitting out with an ankle injury? So I don't know how much you can count on, but that's the kind of guy that they need. They've got enough, or at least it should have enough, in terms of wing defense with Anunoby and Bridges and Josh Hart. But as good as Karl Towns has been offensively, he has been eminently exploitable defensively. And we've seen that, a few times against top tier teams in the conference. And I mean, you get to the playoffs, and I think what Boston did to them last Saturday, where they attacked him, what the Hawks did, the Hawks lost that game. They put up 149 points
Yeah.
in that game. Like you can't offense your way to success in the NBA. We've seen it with team after team over the years that's attempted to do it, from the Mike D'Antoni teams to all that followed him. You've got to have a defensive identity. And right now they don't have a defensive identity. And I don't think there's the personnel there to change that. I think this is kind of who they
No.
are. And unless Mitchell Robinson comes back and looks like the guy we've seen for parts of the last couple of years, I just don't see it.
Look, if Cleveland or Boston didn't have elite offenses, you could make a case, well, styles make fights and they're going to be able to overcome those teams. But Cleveland and Boston both have very, very high ceilings on offense. They got a lot of different playmakers. They got a lot of shooting. They've got inside, outside. They've got better lineup diversity in terms of playing big or playing small. Both Cleveland and Boston are, I think, a little bit more flexible that way than New York is. So that's why they're just kind of up against it. The Knicks, the Minnesota learned this with Towns. If you hide him, you can have playoff success. They hit him with Rudy Gobert, right? They hit him with Naz Reid. They always kind of put him in situations where he could do what he does relatively well on the ball, muscling, joker, those kinds of things, while taking away some of the other responsibilities and limiting his damage. New York has no one to hide Towns. That's the problem. There's nobody there who could really, function in that manner. Maybe it's Mitchell Robinson, but we've been waiting a while, and when is it happening? So that's why I have those kinds of concerns. My other question with New York, they've been playing their guys so many minutes. Shocking that Tibbs would lean on his main guys for high 30s, sometimes low 40s per game, right? But do they have another switch when they get to the playoffs? We saw what happened last year. They tried to flip the switch in the playoffs, and everybody just gassed out and they were done. And half the team was injured. I trust, say, a Cleveland or a Boston that's been pacing itself a little bit better to flip that switch. Let's say they get to the second round against New York. New York's been maxing out since October with their main guys, right? Those guys are going to be tired. There's going to be a fatigue factor. They're not going to necessarily be able to step it up another notch, with maybe the exception of Brunson, who's just an amazing playoff performer. But you look at, being able to keep the minutes off of the main guys in Cleveland, keep the minutes off of the main guys in Boston. I think those teams are way better prepared for like May basketball, June basketball than the New York Knicks.
Yeah, and the Knicks have some nagging injuries already. The hand injury with Towns. Anunoby go out recently with an injury. Like they've got a little bit of these things kind of piling up to a degree. I do think there is a flip side to that coin where like the Cavs are not going to play 10, 11 guys in the playoffs. Like they've got a deep rotation now. Like when they shrink that down, how do they match up against a team like New York, which might be condensed, might be as good or better talent-wise. But if they're out of gas, like I agree with you. Like the Celtics are a different animal. The Celtics, I think the Celtics, who are playing well right now going into the All-Star break, just clobbered San Antonio, for I think the 107th time at home. I think they're going to start building some momentum. I think the question is going to be is like, can the Celtics catch Cleveland over these final 20 some odd games of the regular season? Probably not. But if you're the Knicks, you'd probably rather face the Cavaliers in the second round than Boston. I don't think you want to touch
Oh
the
yeah.
Celtics till you get to the conference finals, do you?
No, I think if you're the Knicks, it's a lot like with the Sixers, where if you have like an obvious flaw, for the Sixers, it was sort of like, Embiid's perimeter defense was something that Boston was just ruthless exploiting in playoff matchups. Like Boston, they'll just go right at it, go right at it. And they've been there so many times, their main guys have. They're going to be ready to go right from the opening of that series. I think if you're New York, you try to delay that matchup as long as possible. You hope somehow Cleveland can upset them. And that's your path, to a deeper run, definitely, if you're the Knicks.
I don't think the Sixers have to worry about the Celtics this year. They're currently going into the break tied with Brooklyn. They have the same record as the Brooklyn Nets.
So what if they get it as the 10 seed? You're not taking the Sixers in the play-in tournament?
I am
Get...
not. I am not. This season is a wrap in Philadelphia, and they know it. They've been making these moves that suggest they're aware of it. And then you see the comment from Joel Embiid to ESPN, be like, "I'm gonna need one more surgery." Okay. Why did anyone give him a contract extension? I'll never understand that. You were just talking about the Jimmy Butler extension. The Joel Embiid extension to me is worse. Joel Embiid extension was for 3 years on top of 2 and takes him into his mid-30s with knee injuries that they had to have known about going into all this. Like, that might be one of the more flawed decisions that any NBA team has made. Simple as that.
Well, yeah. The great news is it's right there with their other flawed decision from last summer, which was giving Paul George all that money. And how is that paying off for the Sixers this year?
That hasn't paid off well, but I don't blame them too much for that because it was spend it or lose it with them, right? Like, I don't know what. I'm not sure what else they could have done. Paul was coming off a great year with the Clippers. They're going to have to pay Tyrese Maxey, so that money was all going to go away. It hasn't worked. Like, that's a problem. But I think the Embiid extension was a much bigger mistake than Paul George.
Well, look, that's the original sin, right? Because you're trying to build around a guy who's never done anything in the NBA playoffs in his entire career and has this long track record of injury issues. There's no question. I just didn't love the strategy of consolidating all that cap space into one player, especially a player of Paul George's age.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the Kevin Durant rumors already percolating coming out of this trade deadline. How long is it going to be until we get some Paul George rumors? Like, what sense does he make in Philadelphia? Why does he want to be in Philadelphia long term if this is where the organization is tied to Embiid and all these questions about a possible surgery? Like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's been a good fit. It hasn't been a win for anybody, certainly not for the organization. It's a lot of money Paul George has got on his contract, and I don't really see him taking the Jimmy Butler bare knuckle approach to forcing his way out of town, right? But I just wonder, was that a mistake and they just try to hit the undo button as soon as possible? Maybe it's not this summer. Maybe that's a little bit too early, but I don't see any way Paul George is playing out that whole contract in Philly. Do you?
I don't know because I'm not sure where you trade him or what the market's for him. Like, his scoring is down from last season. His field goal percentage and 3-point percentage are down 5 points. Like, those are huge numbers. And for a guy that's now in his mid-30s, I'm not sure what the market for him is going to be. They might be stuck with this group. The only guy with any real value is Tyrese Maxey. You don't deal him because he's a stud. But yeah, we got off on the 76ers there for a moment.
Call Phoenix. Just call Phoenix. They're always looking for guys. That's what I would be doing if I was Daryl Morey.
There's this whole narrative now, and I watch too much analysis on TV, but there's this whole narrative now, the Suns, if they had just gotten the deal done with Kevin Durant to Golden State, they could have gotten Jimmy Butler and then been what? Like, Jimmy Butler, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker, who are they beating? Like, what is that? Like, if you could get a team to take Bradley Beal, great. Add Jimmy Butler to that mix, that would have made the Suns better. But come on, Jimmy Butler, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker, that's not going to get you out of the play-in. It's not. Might not even get you in the play-in in the Western Conference. Like, Kevin Durant, their record with Kevin Durant largely is better, much better than it is without him. So I never understood. There's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking going on TV right now, where it's like, oh, the Warrior deal went down. Jimmy Butler would be in Phoenix, and it'd be a whole new world. Yeah, you would have tied yourself to 2 extra years of Jimmy Butler and been nowhere near successful. That team they're snake bitten, man. Like, no matter how many Band-Aids they put on these bullet holes, they're not going to heal themselves up in time to to make any kind of move with this roster. All right, let's talk about a team that is, I think, kind of flying under the radar right now. The Memphis Grizzlies are the number 2 seed in the Western Conference going into this All-Star break, a team that's so deep that at the trade deadline, they traded out 2 good players, and Marcus Smart and Jake LaRivia, for nothing. Like, just gave them actually to give stuff away to get them off the roster. 2 good players. Jaren Jackson is an all-star. Zach Edey and Jalen Wells are part of the Rising Stars team this weekend. They're top 10 in offense and defensive rating. They move the ball well. They move fast. They're off to the second best start in franchise history. Should we be looking at Memphis as a real threat to win the Western Conference?
I don't think so, but I don't want to be dismissive of what they've done because I think it's been really impressive. This group has just grown up. A couple of years ago, before all the Ja Morant gun nonsense, they were just a really young team. Jaren came into the NBA super young. Ja came in young. Obviously, Bane was right around that same time. And they have just progressed right up into their primes. They've made really smart additions around the edges. You mentioned with their recent draft picks who, help keep this, current group still pretty young, pretty fresh and really dynamic. They play super fast. They play super hard. It's a culture team. It reminds me a little bit of Oklahoma City that way. Taylor Jenkins has really gotten everybody to just kind of buy into the group purpose. They play harder than their opponents on most nights. And I think when you have Jaren Jackson as a defensive anchor, you've got a bunch of different scoring weapons. You're not as reliant upon Ja to carry everything like a franchise player. And he's been in and out all season long. And it hasn't been as disruptive as it has been in the past to their offense. They've been able to get by okay without him, which is probably the most impressive aspect to it. Now, when you start to look at playoff matchups, though, I think Oklahoma City is just kind of better across the board than they are. I think if they were to get into some sort of a matchup with Houston, Memphis, that would be a really good series. A lot of guys with tons to prove, and Memphis would actually probably have the playoff advantage in terms of experience in that particular matchup. But I think a lot of these older teams, I'm circling like the Lakers, I'm circling the Warriors, whoever's trying to sneak up out of that play-in, and maybe, having a favorable first or second round matchup, I think they're going to want Memphis because they're going to say, we can slow them down. Ja Morant is, kind of from a day-to-day perspective, not as reliable of a superstar level player as some of these other guys are. And that could be the formula to kind of crack the Grizzlies. Maybe that their depth advantage doesn't matter as much in the playoffs, sort of like you were describing earlier with Cleveland not being able to play as many people, and maybe a team like Memphis could be had for an upset. I think that's going to be how some of these older teams would look at it. Because if you're trying to choose who you want to play, and you're one of those lower seeded teams, I think you'd rather play Memphis. You'd probably rather play Houston way more than an Oklahoma City or a Denver, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. I would say first, I think Zach Kleiman is, outside of Sam Presti, there aren't many better GMs in the NBA than him. I mean, at least not in terms of identifying talent. Like, Zach Edey was not a home run pick. How many people were shocked when Zach Edey was drafted in the top 10 this past year? Like Zach Edey,
A lot.
what? Like,
Yeah.
people had him pegged at late first, early second round. They draft him at 9, and turns out he's among the contenders for Rookie of the Year. Jalen Wells, I don't hear anybody saying they knew Jalen Wells was any good. Mid-second round pick. Come on, give me a break. And that's just another in a long line of guys they have drafted that have been outside of that high lottery range. Like, Ja Morant's the star, but Brandon Clark is there. Desmond Bane is there. I mean, these are not high first-round picks. Now, there have been some misses. The Marcus Smart trade was a miss. You give up 2 firsts to get Marcus Smart. You have to trade another one to get rid of him. Like, that's a miss. But overall, his drafting has been such a big strength and such a big reason that this team is going to be there. But I'm kind of with you where I'm really impressed with Memphis. I'm not quite ready to predict that they'll make it to a conference finals or bet any money that they'll make it to a conference finals. They've done a remarkable job with the number of injuries that they've had. I think they've missed about 250 man games due to injuries this season. It's been guys in and out of the lineup. But they've had to lean pretty heavily on young players. Like, their starting lineup, 40% of it, 2 guys are rookies. So when you have to lean that hard on young players, it often doesn't lead to success in the postseason. They also don't have a great record against the top teams in the Western Conference. They're 0-2 against Oklahoma City. The record against the rest of those teams isn't very good.
Oh, the
Um,
Thunder own them. I mean, they just
yeah,
smack them every time they play.
yeah, it's like close to 40 points total aggregate that they've won these games by. So they're just not good against Oklahoma City. I don't think, Ben, that they're missing anything, right? Like I don't look at this team as saying they need to go get this guy or that guy. I mean, they probably could use another 3-and-D guy, but everybody in the league could use one of those types of guys on the wing. I just think they're a little bit too young at key positions, and I think they need
Yeah.
another year for these guys to get a little bit older.
I think the only thing they're missing is A plus Jaw, and we've seen A plus Jaw
Yeah,
in stretches in the playoffs in the past. So if he comes back, he could stay perfectly healthy through a playoff run. Could they win 2 series? It's we have to account for it. It's definitely possible. I remember when he outdueled Anthony Edwards in that playoff series. He had some moments before he got injured against the Golden State Warriors in that playoff series. So that is their X factor. That's how they kind of reach a ceiling that maybe skeptics would say they're not going to reach, but it's just hard to trust Ja, and it's amazing how far he's fallen off the NBA's map. Like we're here in San Francisco for All-Star Weekend. Ja's not even mentioned. A couple of years ago, it was please do the dunk contest. Oh, maybe he should be in the starting lineup of the All-Star game. He's still recovering from those self-inflicted wounds that he had from those suspensions, and of course from last year's shoulder injury. He hasn't worked his way all the way back. I'm not sure he's going to really have a chance to do that until this year's playoffs. I think that's really going to be his first time back on the big stage. And I think that's, if you want to be a Grizzly optimist, that's the best reason to be optimistic is like, man, Ja thrives with the chip on his shoulder. If he's healthy, watch out. Like, don't underestimate him because he's still got that all world athleticism, the amazing vision, the crafty scoring ability, get to the free throw line, inspire his teammates. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we remember seeing a couple years ago that we just have not seen consistently since then.
yeah. I was going to bring him up because he is the wild card for this team. Um, he was not an all-star. He wasn't discussed when they were looking for an injury replacement for Anthony Davis. He's just kind of slipped into that mid-range of NBA point guards. Maybe not the mid-range, but back half of the top 10,
Yeah.
at least right now. His scoring is down from his last full season. His field goal percentage is down. His three-point percentage is up, but he's still shooting in the low 30s from three-point range. He's averaging nearly 4 turnovers per game, which is not good. They need him to be much more careful with the basketball. I don't really know what is going on with him down there. Is it an accumulation of all the injuries he's had to deal with, including some this season, having to miss all but 9 games of last season, working his way back into the mix in a new system? Like look, they're playing really fast in Memphis. They were like, the
Yeah.
slowest team in the league last year, and now they're the fastest team in the league. Like, this is another move by Zach Kleiman. Like, there was a lot of bellyaching questions when he broomed out the entire coaching staff around Taylor Jenkins, but they brought in a bunch of guys that know how to coach this system, and they're going up and down the floor. I think they're lead the NBA or second in the NBA in assists. Like, they move the ball. Like, they get shots up quickly. Maybe there's some adjustment there for Ja Morant, not being kind of the focal point of a half-court offense. But we know that in the playoffs, no matter how fast you play in the regular season, the game is going to slow down. You're going to be stuck playing
Yep.
half-court offense. And that's another area that I'm not sure Memphis is as adept at as some of the teams they're going up against, like efficiency in that half court. You play them in transition, they're probably going to beat you 9 times out of 10. You force them to play a half court game, they haven't shown that they have the horses to be an efficient half court team. And that's partly or largely due to the fact that Ja Morant is not Ja Morant right now.
Correct. And I think that some of his declines have come from them trying to ease him back in, not playing him the huge minutes, trying to reduce their dependence on him a little bit. So that's a smart regular season strategy. But all the burden goes back on the Stars during the playoffs. We saw it a couple years ago when they faced the Lakers. The Lakers controlled the tempo. The Lakers controlled the pace for the vast majority of that series. LeBron James kind of slowed it down, did whatever he wanted in the half court, executed against Dylan Brooks when he was still there for Memphis. And then Anthony Davis just kind of controlled things defensively. That's why I'm saying some of these older teams, they're going to look at Memphis and say, we can do that. We can follow that blueprint against these guys. And I think the only player with enough talent to shake that up, it's Ja. As much as I love Jaren Jackson Jr., and he's been a very effective offensive player, he's really grown his offensive game. I don't think he's a takeover player yet in terms of offense in the postseason, right? Where he can go out there and give you, like a 36 and 18, right? Where it's just like, whoa, he was the best guy on the court tonight. That's not really his style. That's not really his modus operandi. I don't think he even really wants to be that type of guy. I think he's more attuned to that number 2 role. So I think the pressure will fall back on Ja. It doesn't have to be a one-man deal because they have a lot of talent, like you described. But he's going to have to be the guy that pulls them through, and he has to prove it. He has to win it all back. I mean, that's one of the things you mentioned when he's not even in this All-Star conversation. It's not like he's a snub, right? Like, does he deserve to be in that conversation? No, I think we would all agree that there's a pecking order, and he wasn't a part of it. And again, I just hope that's motivation and fuel for him because it wasn't that long ago people were saying this guy's the future face of the NBA. But the NBA moves quick. Anthony Edwards comes along, Wemby comes along. All of a sudden, Luka's a Laker. Well, there's a lot of competition for who wants to be that face. And I would just like to see, Ja, don't go so quietly. Get yourself back in this conversation, have a big playoffs, and people are going to be hopping back on your bandwagon.
I will say this. I would like to see a Memphis Houston matchup, if only to see how many games Dylan Brooks gets ejected from. Like I would go over under 1.5 ejections.
Dogfight, right?
Yeah, I'd go over on the 1.5 because I think Dylan Brooks back in Memphis going up against his former team would be a lot of fun in a second round postseason series. Ben, I appreciate your time, man. Check out Ben's stuff in the Washington Post, and you can catch him all weekend long at the Chase Center, at the celebrity game, at the dunk contest, the skills competition, at All-Star game itself, because Ben loves All-Star weekend. He is here for all the activities and will be chronicling them every single day, won't you, Ben?
I'll be trying. I'm trying to love it. I talk myself into it every year, and then we get to Sunday. It's like, oh man, really? But hopefully, just give me a good dunk contest. It's not too much to ask for, Chris.
Mac McClung going for the three-peat.